first. When you take a look at both of these QBs, who had the most impressive start so far in the preseason?
Well, to me, it was Shedeur. I didn't see any interceptions when he was out there. Didn't see anything like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think Dillon Gabriel did a bad job. I was impressed with the brother, but I'm going to go with Shedeur. You know, the pressure was on him. The spotlight was on him. He showed up out on the field. You know, he played.
Stephen A. Smith didn't just check Dillon Gabriel. He obliterated him. He grabbed that mic like it was a sword and carved Dillon's confidence into confetti. The second Dillon Gabriel thought it was a good idea to throw shade at Shedeur Sanders, he basically volunteered for a public roasting session.
Heard the comparisons were emanating from the media more so than anybody else. And that's what I think, that's exactly who I think he was directing his comments towards. Having said that, Dillon Gabriel, respectfully, it was stupid. A very dumb comment to make. First of all, let me tell you something right now. In every walk of life, far beyond the parameters of a football field.
Man, he walked straight into Stephen A.'s world. And that's not just a studio, that's a gladiator arena. You don't stroll into that space unless you're fully armored and ready to take hits, because Stephen A. swings with words that sting harder than a right hook. This wasn't a debate, it was a massacre.
But only Dan Orlovsky would sit up here in comparison to Shedeur Sanders, who did no such thing, and say, hey, I thought he looked better. I got to give him the edge here. I thought it wasn't bad. A pick six and a fumble, and we can get over fumbles. Have you heard anybody say that? I know it's possible. Have you ever heard anybody say, we can get over fumbles?
Dillon Gabriel got turned into highlight reel roadkill, while Stephen A. drove circles around him with facts, charisma, and pure media dominance. Let's be real. Dillon, with his almost but not quite resume, had no business taking shots at Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur's been through more media storms than Dillon's had game-winning drives, and yet here comes Dillon acting like he's the standard. Please, he just learned the hard way. You don't come for Shedeur unless your legacy's bulletproof. Stephen A. Smith smelled blood the second Dillon Gabriel opened his mouth. And he didn't wait a single beat. He pounced like a lion spotting an injured gazelle before Dillon could even finish his sentence.
It's possible those who produce get treated differently than those who don't. What he said echoes the mentality of all of America practically, and most certainly the world, as we see things being globalized more and more every day. It was a stupid, idiotic, immature comment, because clearly you were feeling the heat because a lot of people was talking about how Shedeur should be QB number.
Stephen A. had snatched that mic, sprinted the full 100 yards, and dropped a roast so brutal the whole NCAA media world froze mid-scroll just to watch. It was like watching a schoolyard showdown, and everyone knew who was walking away with the crown. Let's keep it real. Dillon Gabriel's reputation? Solid, but unspectacular.
Interesting in seeing how the Browns react to this, how the locker room reacts to this, how Shedeur reacts to this, because it was a clear shot at Shedeur. But let's say Dillon Gabriel was talking about the media. How could you be a brand new quarterback in the NFL and the first time you get behind a mic after your first game, you throw the media under the bus? That's arrogant stupidity.
He's good enough to shine against mid-tier teams, but when the lights hit playoff brightness, the man vanishes like Wi-Fi in a storm. Dillon's the football version of a Hulu subscription. Gets the job done, sure, but nobody's out here bragging about it. Yet somehow, he thought it was smart to talk down on Shedeur Sanders, the guy who pulled an entire program out of quicksand and made it must-watch TV. It was downright hilarious. Stephen A. peeled Dillon's overconfidence layer by layer, like stripping a rotten onion in front of a live audience. And that's the thing, Stephen A. lives for these moments. The man probably wakes up every morning hoping someone says something reckless, just so he can roll out that verbal bazooka and light the whole timeline on fire.
A little content today on his 42nd
I want you to be meaner.
birthday. That's number one. Number two, after the game, the Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski said there was a mix-up in the routes and that players were in the areas that they shouldn't have been.
Look at Stephen A's face. Look at Stephen A's face. Look at his face.
Stephen A.
Oh my Lord. So that's what we do.
Dillon Gabriel handed Stephen A. Smith a gift, the kind of easy target that makes roast season feel like Christmas morning, All Stephen A. had to do was unwrap it and start cooking. The way he tore through Dillon's so-called credibility was straight-up performance art. He didn't even have to dig deep. The material was just sitting there waiting to be used. Stephen A. didn't bother reminding anyone that Dillon's been hopping schools like a hitchhiker thumbing rides on the college football highway, trying to find somewhere to stick. He didn't have to mention that Dillon's name never even got close to real Heisman talk. Nah, he just burned him alive with the truth. The truth that Shedeur Sanders isn't some wandering quarterback for hire. He's the guy, a future franchise leader in the making. The beauty of Stephen A.'s takedown was that it went beyond words. It was spiritual. He didn't just roast Dillon's take, he dismantled his whole aura. Dillon Gabriel walks around like he's the underdog who's one game away from shocking the world. But here's the hard truth. The world ain't even watching. And that's what stung the most. Stephen A. reminded him loud and clear that nobody even asked for his opinion. When it came to defending Shedeur Sanders, Stephen A. went nuclear, because Shedeur isn't just any quarterback. He's the son of Dillon Sanders, the man who turned swagger into a legacy. That means every throw, every headline, every camera flash hits Shedeur with pressure Dillon couldn't even imagine.
Stupidity, or all of it. I thought it was a clear shot at Shedeur due to the fact that his Oregon coach threw a shot at Coach Prime and Shedeur during their meeting at Colorado last year. But you know what? The cream rises to the top. Let's see what happens this week. I see a lot of the media talking about they think it was about the media and not about Shedeur. And I think that's a chess move on him.
Yet through all of that chaos, Shedeur stays composed, walks with that confidence, and delivers clutch performances that revived a program everyone had already written off. For Dillon Gabriel to take a swing at Shedeur Sanders was like a neighborhood kid trying to throw hands with Mike Tyson. It was never gonna end well. Stephen A. made sure the world understood just how wild that mismatch was. Dillon's little call-out didn't just miss, it crashed and burned, hard. In media terms, that move was career suicide. Because you don't take shots at the son of Dillon Sanders, especially when Dillon's turned Colorado football into a national spectacle. It was a brutal reminder. Dillon Gabriel's always played like a guy fighting for attention in a world that never really looked his way. He's been around long enough to fill a stat sheet, but not long enough to earn true respect. And that's what made his jab at Shedeur so embarrassing. Because even when Shedeur has ups and downs, his name dominates headlines. Dillon's biggest headline? Transferred again. And Stephen A. stomped on that insecurity without hesitation, dragging Dillon's reputation through the mud like a quarterback who just threw a game-ending pick six.
And this year, let's see some of them step up and make some plays out here.
Ain't no way.
Gabriel
Ain't no way. He's not built like that. No way.
And this one is picked off and going back the other way.
Oh my God! Why did he stop playing?
Now it's a foot race, and that is that.
They told me bust out my AP, perfect timing. H-shot, we about to get legendary. Shedeur started the next game, baby. Shout out Dillon, though, you know what I'm saying, bro? I love you, my heart. What am I bigger than cheese, bro? You know what I'm saying? But Shedeur got it. I ain't never seen Shedeur do that first.
And here's the wild part. Stephen A. didn't even have to scream to make it sting. Though of course he did, because he's Stephen A. He went full scorched earth. He painted Dillon as the poster boy for players who talk louder than their resumes. And somehow, he did it while hyping Shedeur like a proud hype man with a mission. It was savage, it was poetic, and it was perfectly timed. Because Stephen A. wasn't just calling Dillon out, he was exposing desperation. Let's be real, Dillon Gabriel's track record is fine, nothing more. Solid stats? Sure. Wins over average defenses? Yeah, he's got those. But where's the legacy? Where's the Heisman talk that lasts past October? Where's that one playoff moment that locks your name into history forever? Exactly. Nowhere to be found. The answer's simple. It doesn't exist.
What I had before the Cleveland Browns preseason game today is that the way that some white folks watched Shedeur Sanders last week is the way that some black folks were watching Dillon Gabriel today. And it's not Dillon Gabriel for Dillon Gabriel's sake. Most folks don't have a problem with Dillon Gabriel. It's what he represents, which is the disrespect of a black person for no other apparent reason than they are a confident black person, which makes the things that...
Dillon Gabriel is the quarterback equivalent of a mid-tier chain restaurant. It'll fill you up, it'll get the job done, but let's be honest, nobody's bragging about eating there. Nobody's making dinner plans around it. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders, that man's a brand. He's box office. You don't just watch his games for the score, you watch for the show. The energy, the confidence, the whole vibe screams, main event. So when Dillon tried to talk down on him, it was like some indie flick trying to clown Marvel. All it did was sound bitter. And Stephen A. smelled that bitterness instantly, then roasted it until it was nothing but ashes. Stephen A. didn't hold back for a second. He went right for Dillon's insecurities, his envy, and that total lack of self-awareness. Because seriously, if Dillon thought the sports world was gonna nod in agreement while he threw shade at Shedeur, he was dreaming.
He completed 8 of his first 9 passes, threw a pick 6, bad decision, but was later credited with a fumble on a botched handoff. After the game, he made some very, very interesting comments. He said, there are entertainers and there are competitors, and my job is to compete. He tried to clarify later at the presser, saying he meant the media are the entertainers and a competitor, and he's a competitor, and he wasn't taking a shot at Shedeur.
Stephen A. didn't just dismantle Dillon's argument, he dismantled the man behind it. Sure, Dillon will bounce back. He'll still suit up, still do interviews, still have fans yelling his name. But every time he faces a camera now, that moment's gonna haunt him. The echo of Stephen A. Smith's voice roasting him to dust for daring to come at Shedeur Sanders. It's the kind of moment that sticks to your career like glue. The kind of roast that becomes part of your highlight reel, whether you like it or not.
Fascinating. Because Dillon started the game really well, and I was like, okay, he's balling a little bit. And of course, I mean, played college football for 42 years. He's the NCAA leader in touchdowns. Like, he should be able to ball a little bit. Then he threw a pick 6, and I was like, yeah, there's no way they would let Shedeur get away with that, so we're not gonna let you either, my boy. And then he was being interviewed, and he said this.
Yeah, I think it's just part of it. You know, there's entertainers.
Dillon thought he was punching up. Instead, he got smacked right back down into the pile of good but not great quarterbacks, the ones history forgets once the next big name shows up. And Stephen A., he exposed the raw truth. Dillon Gabriel doesn't move culture. He doesn't shift the conversation. Because in sports, it's never just about stats. It's about story. And Dillon's story, forgettable. Shedeur's, unforgettable. That's the line Stephen A. drew in flames. Loud, bold, and absolutely unforgiving. By the time Stephen A. Smith was done, Dillon Gabriel's credibility looked like it had been fed through a wood chipper and left in pieces. That roast wasn't just harsh, it was final. It sent shockwaves through every locker room in the country, warning anyone thinking about taking a swing at Shedeur Sanders, don't do it. Because if you do, Stephen A. will be waiting with that trademark fire, ready to turn your rep into the next viral cautionary tale. And Dillon Gabriel, he just learned that lesson the hard way. But here's the real takeaway. Dillon's stumble wasn't just about one reckless comment. It pulled the curtain back on the massive gap between quarterbacks who chase relevance and those who command it naturally.
Yeah, nah. Why is it even on your mind, bro? Like, why is that thought to even say that it's on your mind? Because you know.
I just gave you the context.
You know the circus that is around you every day, though. Like, you're at practice every day. Like, that was dumb to say that, but because you know when you say that, how it can be taken. You could say, yeah.
You think he meant Shedeur Sanders?
I don't think he meant it, but I think he should have chosen his words better. How about that?
But if he says I was talking about the media.
How about I think he just should have chosen.
Dillon's the type always fighting to be seen, grinding for that spotlight. Shedeur, he is the spotlight. Even when he's silent, he owns the room. The man can dominate a news cycle without even throwing a pass that week, and that's real power. That's where Stephen A. dug deep, reminding everyone that credibility in sports isn't earned by tearing someone else down. It's built by showing up when the lights are brightest. And that's where Dillon's story falls apart. His career's a highlight reel of moments that almost mattered. Flashy stats, empty wins, and box scores that didn't move the culture one bit. When it came time for those defining moments, the kind that etch your name in history, Dillon shrank instead of shining. Now line that up next to Shedeur Sanders, a guy who steps right into the fire, facing pressure most players would crumble under. Sometimes he dazzles, sometimes he stumbles, but he never hides. He stands tall in the heat, and that's what makes him different. By the time Stephen A. Smith was done, Dillon Gabriel's credibility looked like it had been fed through a wood chipper and left in pieces. That roast wasn't just harsh, it was final. It sent shockwaves through every locker room in the country, warning anyone thinking about taking a swing at Shedeur Sanders. Don't do it, because if you do, Stephen A. will be waiting with that trademark fire, ready to turn your rep into the next viral cautionary tale. And Dillon Gabriel? He just learned that lesson the hard way. But here's the real takeaway. Dillon's stumble wasn't just about one reckless comment. It pulled the curtain back on the massive gap between quarterbacks who chase relevance and those who command it naturally. Dillon's the type always fighting to be seen, grinding for that spotlight. Shedeur? He is the spotlight. Even when he's silent, he owns the room. The man can dominate a news cycle without even throwing a pass that week, and that's real power. That's where Stephen A. dug deep, reminding everyone that credibility in sports isn't earned by tearing someone else down. It's built by showing up when the lights are brightest. And that's where Dillon's story falls apart. His career's a highlight reel of moments that almost mattered. Flashy stats, empty wins, and box scores that didn't move the culture one bit. When it came time for those defining moments, the kind that etch your name in history, Dillon shrank instead of shining. Now line that up next to Shedeur Sanders, a guy who steps right into the fire, facing pressure most players would crumble under. Sometimes he dazzles, sometimes he stumbles, but he never hides. He stands tall in the heat, and that's what makes him different. Shedeur Sanders, that's a player who stood in the storm, taken every hit, and kept pushing forward. And that's exactly what made Stephen A. Smith's takedown so lethal. He smelled the hypocrisy in Dillon Gabriel's comments and used it as jet fuel to torch the entire narrative. Once Stephen A. laid it all out, Dillon's argument didn't just crumble. It became a full-blown comedy routine. Think about the ripple effect. Dillon thought he was tossing a harmless jab at Shedeur Sanders, just a quick soundbite to stir the pot. Instead, he set the stage for Stephen A. to drag him under the brightest spotlight of his entire career. And it wasn't the kind of shine he wanted. Because in the sports world, moments like this are everything. One bad take can undo years of grinding. And now Dillon's living that reality. What he said about Shedeur won't go down as bold commentary. It'll be remembered as the spark that gave Stephen A. Smith one of his most viral roasts ever. 10 years from now, when people hear the name Dillon Gabriel, they won't be talking about touchdowns or passing yards. They'll remember that day. The day he tried to clown Shedeur Sanders and got his career publicly shredded by Stephen A. Smith, live on air. That's legacy too, just not the one he wanted. But let's be real, this whole mess only made Shedeur Sanders stronger. Every time a player like Dillon Gabriel takes a shot at him, it just proves how big Shedeur's presence really is. Because if he wasn't a major force in the game, nobody would even mention his name. The fact that Dillon said it at all just shows Shedeur's impact. He's in their heads without even trying. And when Stephen A. flipped the script, he turned Dillon's weak insult into a megaphone for Shedeur's greatness. He made sure everyone saw how even his critics can't stop acknowledging his influence. That's real power, the kind that money or stats can't buy. Dillon thought he was landing a punch, but instead, he volunteered to headline Stephen A.'s Roast Festival, and that's a ticket you can't refund. The aftermath's rough. Dillon goes back to the field, back to trying to rebuild his image, pretending it didn't sting. Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders, he walks away untouched, stronger, and louder without even saying a single word. That's the ultimate win, the kind of defense you can't coach, can't script, and can't buy. Stephen A. made it crystal clear for every other quarterback out there. Keep Shedeur Sanders' name out your mouth, or you'll end up the next Dillon Gabriel. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and drop a comment, because this story, it's far from over, and you won't want to miss what happens next.